And welcome into the Week 2 Fantasy 4-Pack Waiver Wire Show. We need a new name for this. It's not really just a Waiver Wire Show anymore. Maybe like a Roster Bonanza Show.
Yeah, it's more of a
Roster Mania.
Roster Mania makes it sound too chaotic.
I mean, it is very chaotic.
This show is anything but chaotic. We are structured.
Football is one of those chaotic of the fantasy sports.
All right, mate. Well, we'll workshop it. But it's roster something because this is no longer just the waiver show. If you were here with us last year, where at the end of our 3 and out segment, we would give you our waiver picks for the next week. We're shifting away from that. We're dedicating a show to general roster management things, trade fours and aways, starts, money picks, and your waiver ads for the upcoming week. So we got a whole bunch on the slate here for you today. Before we dive into it, if you like the content we're bringing to the table, if you're enjoying hearing our shining voices and seeing our smiling faces, make sure to hit that subscribe button, ring the notification bell, follow us on our socials at the Fantasy 4-Pack, at Fantasy4P_Ian, at Senpai Koala, and at The Spoon. That's where you can reach us on Twitter. And feel free to leave a comment down in the comments section if you have any questions for us. If you want to just comment on the video as a whole, or anything more direct that we were talking about during this or any other segment. A little bit of news that we got to dig into before we hit the meat and potatoes of this show too. Antonio, and a lot of these are just precautionary mentions. Most teams didn't actually have practices today. So this is just, if they did, this is what it would have been. But Antonio Gibson, shoulder would have been limited. Saquon Barkley, knee would have been limited. And Evan Ingram, calf would have been limited. Those are the 3 that I saw mentioned. Nothing to really worry about with the first 2. At least they both got on the field this past week. Barring any setbacks in practice, they both should still be on the field. Evan Ingram's one to keep an eye on. Hopefully you're not relying on him. Now to the sad part. Ryan Fitzpatrick, hip subluxation. Sidelined 6 to 8 weeks. I guess this is a very similar. I've looked into it a little bit more between yesterday and today. It's been officially designated as that. He got the MRI. They're saying it's going to be 6 to 8 weeks. It's essentially a less severe version of what Tua had. So he is going to be missing time. And for someone Fitzpatrick's age, I mean, this could end up just being career-ending, unfortunately, because you don't have a lot of rope left to play with when you're 38 years old and you get an injury that takes you out for half the season. So I hope it isn't. I hope we get to see him again at some point this season. But if he just hangs it up as a result of this, I'm not going to be surprised.
Yeah, it's going to be in the playoffs when they somehow win the NFC East.
Somehow win? They're clearly still the best team.
Listen, the Cowboys looked great.
Yeah,
but I don't have faith that we're going to.
Were you watching a different Cowboys, Frankie?
Listen, if I remember correctly, people were saying we were going to get smoked by the Bucs, and we shouldn't have lost because our kicker decided he didn't want to kick the ball. But that's neither here nor there. I think that Washington has looked like the best team in the NFC East, and I mean, obviously without Fitzpatrick, that's a whole lot different. I don't have the same confidence I do in them. Yeah,
they've got some offensive injuries stacking up pretty quick here now. Fitzpatrick was a big reason that people were confident in this offense in the first place, because of the skill level he can play at. It's a pretty serious. We talked about it on yesterday's show, but it's a pretty serious downgrading for me now that it's going to be Heineke or someone else under center. Unless they go out and they trade for a Jimmy Garoppolo or an Aaron Rodgers, and get someone to really give a kickstart to that offense.
Hey,
I don't really see them going anywhere.
I heard Cam's looking for work.
Yeah, I don't know that he's better than Taylor Heineke, if I'm being honest. Raheem Mostert, another unfortunate case here. That man is bones made of glass and skin made of paper. He chipped his cartilage in his knee and is going to be out at least 8 weeks.
That sounds like it hurts.
Yeah. It sounds like it needs surgery. Because it probably
does.
Yeah, so that's... He was one where we didn't really know what happened, and he said he was going in for an MRI. We talked about, assess after the MRI. Now that the MRI has happened, and we know it's guaranteed at least 8, because you hate hearing at least 8 weeks. Not like, well, it's 6 to 8. We're hopeful it's gonna be on the slow side. It's like, oh no, it's minimum 8. It's like, well, when you phrase it like that, it makes it sound like it's more. What are you guys doing with Mostert? Like, because a lot of leagues don't have IR slots. What are you doing with him if you probably drafted him in the 6th, 7th round, maybe as high as 5th rounds in some leagues, probably as your 2nd or 3rd running back. Are you holding on to him through this 8-week, half the season, in hopes that he gets back on the field and doesn't get hurt again, or are you just sunk cost, let him go, be free, go into the wild?
I mean, you could really argue either point depending on your team. If you're really going to feel like I'm going to be hurting for depth at running back, or if you know that there's a Mostert homer out there who thinks he's got a really good team, maybe you sell him on the super cheap and be like, hey, you get Mostert back in 8
Like
weeks.
20 cents on the dollar.
Yeah, just go out there and like, hey, this guy looks, basically a waiver wire ad that you
Sure.
can basically trade for.
Like, hey, you want to give me Michael Carter for this guy?
Yeah.
As a completely unbiased party in this Mostert injury, personally, unbiasedly, of course, like Vital said, it depends on how your team is, and if you didn't draft at running back depth, like some of this table may not have. They could be a nice little playoff stash for you, and maybe he comes back. But
if only we were preaching running back depth on this show.
Yeah, if only
summer.
we had done that all offseason and all of us had followed that, it would be a utopian society. But hypothetically that we didn't do that, some of us may be in trouble, and they may need to move him for 50 cents on the dollar, package with somebody else who is actually useful.
Now, Frankie, for this hypothetical friend you're talking about here, are you keeping Mostert on your team? Or are you if no one bites on Mostert, are you cutting him? Like, let's pretend, because our league has an IR slot. Let's pretend we don't have an IR slot. Are you setting Mostert free?
So my question for you would be, in that hypothetical scenario, because
sure,
this is actual hypothetical scenario.
Yep.
Who am I dropping him for if that is the case?
That's a great question. We're going to be talking about some of those players later in this show.
Yeah.
But there are tons of, especially this time of year, there are tons of waiver ads that can actually give you fantasy performances that a guy with a chipped knee cartilage cannot.
Yeah.
And the thing that I will say to that is, he's gone 8 weeks, sure. Which, thankful this happened in week 1, if it's going to happen at all. Looking at the back half of the season, if you're a team who, I'm just going to use me as a literal example. I happen to be the unlucky person who manages both Mostert and Jerry Jeudy.
Yep.
If I can't move him for something that's going to, be substantial enough where it's going to help me in the back half of the season more than he could possibly help me in the back half of the season, then I'm just going to eat what I have to with him, because running back is so shallow. Maybe try and move Jeudy in a package with somebody else, and just kind of hope that he comes back and helps me out later, because we always talk about how running back is so shallow, but wide receiver you can make up, later, like with later round picks, because the differential between those 6th round guys and those 12th round guys is so much more shallow than your 5th round to 7th round running backs and your just 12th round waiver ad running backs.
For me, he's an instant drop. I don't believe in rostering players that are going to be out that long if you don't have an IR slot, especially with no firm timetable on returning. That's maybe 8 weeks, could be 10, could be 12, could be next season. It depends. It's going to depend on how rehab goes and recovery. If I don't have an IR slot and I can't quickly find a trade partner, he's an instant cut for me.
Yeah. So just my last 2 things to round out this point, though. 1, glad I turned down that trade from a certain someone at this table. And 2, actually I think there is a little bit of gamesmanship in dropping him right now, getting him out there for waivers this week.
Yeah.
Somebody is going to try and pick him up. Somebody's going to hold him.
Well, and if you use Fab, he's a big enough name that you could get a couple people in on him. Maybe you get someone to overspend on a guy they aren't going to be able to, use for 10 weeks.
Right, and now they're having to drop something off their bench that could potentially be valuable to you, and it's a bench spot you're eating on somebody else's team.
Sure. Speaking of another guy that Frankie had on his roster, we also spoke to this yesterday. Jerry Jeudy was confirmed he has a high ankle sprain. Teams talking about this being a 4 to 6 week injury. I've heard others saying it's a 6 to 8 week injury. It's somewhere in the 4 to 8 week range for the recovery timetable for this. I went back and watched the hit. Didn't look good. I was like, ooh, that's a bad ankle.
I had 2 good seasons. That's all I'm given. I'm back to where I was 5 years ago.
This was obviously I don't, I'm not a doctor. I didn't examine Jerry Jeudy's ankle, but like judging by the hit that the injury happened on, I was like, that's probably closer to 8. It didn't look great. Are you guys kind of in the same camp with Jeudy as you are with Mostert, where it's like if you don't have an IR slot, you're just setting him free?
Yeah, he's definitely one to set free just because, as Frankie was saying, the depth at wide receiver is so much more. And on top of that, this is a real bad injury that he could come back at 6, but it could still plague him for the rest of the season.
Yeah, we saw with Michael Thomas last year. High ankle sprains and injuries like that are really tough to come back from in season because they linger. So yeah, I'm the same way there. Unfortunately, I don't think there's much upside to Jeudy this season. He's a 2022 candidate now at this point.
It's like it's Court and Sutton all over again.
Well, don't get your hopes up yet, Frankie. You can still somehow injure him. And then Damien Harris, who had a pretty good Sunday up until a costly fumble that likely cost the Patriots the game. Mike Reese was speaking on that. He said that the workload for Damien Harris could decrease after that costly fumble. Obviously, Ramondre Stevenson also fumbled. There's talk in the team locker room, I guess, that they're expecting J.J. Taylor to get some run because Ramondre is firmly in the doghouse right now. Knowing how Bill is with ball security and not giving up, fumbles at inopportune times, I could see Damien Harris maybe missing. I don't think this hurts Damien Harris long term unless he keeps fumbling. But short term, maybe especially against the hapless Jets, I could see J.J. Taylor getting the first snaps of the game, maybe getting a quarter of run while Damien Harris sits on the bench and thinks about what he's done.
Yeah, we've seen it before with Bill. Not afraid to sit the guys that have been given the starting role for costly mistakes like this. I think it's more going to be a few downs. It also depends on the game script. If the game starts kind of getting a little out of hand, they need to put their starter back in. He'll see the field a little bit quicker. But
sure.
Yeah, I could see his upside for this week being affected.
All right. Well, I think that's all of the news that I had. Do you guys have anything you want to bring up, or are we set to move on into the meat and potatoes of the show?
I'm all set. I can already taste the ice house.
Okay. So we're going to lead in with our trade targets today. We've prepared 3, 1 each, to acquire and 3 to get off your team as quickly as possible. Or, in Frankie's case, maybe you wait and see if you can milk a few more good matchups out of him and then get rid of him. But I'm going to actually let Frankie start off because he stole my guy. So because you were so antsy to take Melvin Gordon, Frankie, why don't you lead us in?
I mean,
we'll do our tradeaways first and save the good gubbins for the second round.
I mean, we kind of touched on this yesterday. Fontaine actually brought up a super great point, and shout out to him. If you haven't, check out yesterday's episode. I'm gonna link that up there. But Melvin Gordon, going into the season, I mean, I always thought it was gonna be like a split workload. Basically, we saw that yesterday, where that 70-yard run saved his day. Other than that, it was pretty average, to say the least. And
pedestrian is a good word for that.
Yes. Actually, that's a great word. I mean, he's one of those guys where just because of that 70-yard run, it inflated his total overall. And there are guys in the league who are going to, in whatever league you may be in, who are going to just look at that. Maybe they aren't as savvy. Maybe they're like, oh, Melvin Gordon, this is a name I know. He is a guy who has had that, good seasons in the past where he's been a top running back. And because he had such an explosive first week as far as, his numbers go, not exactly what he did in efficiency. I mean, I'm looking to move him, especially because running backs are shallow. I mean, maybe you can get him for a lesser back and a wide receiver. Maybe you get him for just two pieces in general. I'm looking for a 2-for-1 for him, just because. I mean, you trade him to the Mostert owner or manager rather, who's, I mean, probably, depending how they're drafted, maybe super shallow at running back now.
Yeah, no, I like the Melvin Gordon thing because of how shallow running back is and how maybe not a household name, but at least for fantasy players, he's a well-known commodity. He's had known years of fantasy success. So seeing him come out of the gates against a tough defense like the Giants and post a respectable stat line, like that's something that fantasy managers are gonna like. Oh, look, good amount of carries, good amount of yards, hit pay dirt, cool, everything I'm looking for. You can, because of the inequities between positions, you can probably swap him for a tier 3 or tier 4 wide receiver. Try and get him in there for like a Terry McLaurin maybe, or see if you can snipe a Mike Evans who had a bad week. Take advantage of a manager who might be tilting over him barely getting used. Like, I think there's some room to play with him there.
Yeah, for certain. I definitely think that he's a guy that I would be packaging with a wide receiver who you weren't too enthused about, but there's other managers out there in favor of, or just someone who has a little bit lower of a ceiling, like maybe a Jarvis Landry. You pair him with Jarvis Landry and you try and trade up for a running back that maybe had a subpar week or something like that, which there were plenty of.
Sure. Actually, I think I'll talk about this when I circle back around to the trade fours, but I think that actually probably both of our trade fours are probably good people that if you are trying to make a package deal with Melvin Gordon, they're ones to try and hone in on for that deal. Yeah. All right, for my trade away, I am looking at Mr. Bob Anderson because his stat line makes his week look way better than it actually was. We got some clarity on what this Panthers offense is going to look like this week, and it doesn't look like it's going to really involve Bob Woods much. He looked like the fourth option on this team. He got bailed out because he ended up in the end zone on a long catch and run, but like it was not what anyone was expecting drafting Robbie Anderson where they were drafting. I mean, Christian McCaffrey returned to the number 1 wide receiver role. We all expected that, but like he was getting outsnapped and outtouched by all of his compatriots. He's the almost just the wide receiver version of Melvin Gordon for me this week, where if you're someone who you're only looking at the box scores, maybe you didn't watch the games and you aren't really aware of what happened, you just see, oh, that's a respectable line. You could end up regretting trading for him. If you're if you're someone who has this guy, don't get blinded by those stats. Take advantage of that. Try and flip him for something else right away. Go in and try and flip him to maybe the Jerry Jeudy manager or the Brandon Ayuk. Maybe try and flip him straight up for Brandon Ayuk. Because there are I guarantee you there are tilting managers in every league right now. There are people who are pissed because their team didn't do exactly what they wanted week 1 and everything's terrible and the world's on fire. And if you can figure out who they are and you can go in and ship him for, like I said, try and ship him to the Jeudy manager or try and flip him for Brandon Ayuk, something like that. Maybe package him with, maybe you're lucky and you have both these guys and you can slap them together and make a beautiful, beautiful fantasy sandwich. Turn them into from fantasy trash to fantasy treasure, because I think that worse days are ahead for Bobby Anderson.
Sure. Just to kind of continue on the wide receiver hate train, my tradeaway target is Brandon Cooks of the Houston Texans. They came out and surprised. They put up points that I didn't think that they would be able to do. Tyrod Taylor was able to show a connection with Brandon Cooks, but I don't think this is going to happen when they start playing some legit teams. We know the Jags are not that great. They have a rookie
What
quarterback.
are you telling me? Brandon Cook's stat line was inflated because of the Jacksonville Jaguars? Slander.
Yes.
First of all, I have no idea what you're talking about. Everybody thought the Texans were going to go out there and show out.
Jacques.
I am very not shocked at all.
Yeah, so Tyrod, serviceable quarterback. He's a great quarterback for you to have. If you're
Serviceable might be.
Let me caveat this. When your team is in rebuilding mode, you're looking for the next guy. As the Chargers showed us, it's exactly what you want him. You want him there just to be the guy who can take the brunt of a losing franchise while you go and get the next guy. That's exactly what he's there
So
for.
you're saying Tyrod, protect your lungs.
Yes.
The Houston team doctor is like lurking around every corner with a syringe, like, is he coming?
So Brandon Cooks has exactly what Melvin Gordon has. A good stat line. He and the Texans just put up a bunch of points on the board, and he's a known name. And he's been just like that 1,000-yard receiver who always sneaks into easy wide receiver 2 territory. And for me, it's just he's one of those guys that you got so late. Turn him into some gold right now. Pair him with something that either you don't believe in, or if you have Melvin Gordon, or if you have Robbie Anderson. Maybe this guy who's very, very weak wide receiver, and he's looking to get some depth. And you go, hey, look at you got Brandon Cooks and Robbie Anderson. Look how good they are. And then they go, oh my God, that would help my team so much. Here's a running back that was doing bad this week. Here's a guy that I'll be talking about later, Antonio Gibson, and he's just like, oh my God, you helped my team so much. And now he's just like, wait, these are pumpkins. He's not, just like. This is a guy who, plus age, plus terrible team, should turn back to a pumpkin.
See, I think there is still value with Brandon Cooks. I'm fine with him being a trade away if you want to just not be a part of the Houston Texans, because I get that.
Yep.
But of the tradeaways, he's probably the one that I'd be most interested in trading for, especially because no one really because he's a Texan and because he's Brandon Cooks, no one really gives him any credit. Like, he doesn't really have any real value. Sometimes it feels like so he is generally fairly cheap to acquire, I think.
Right. My other big reason why I'm down on Brandon Cooks this season is this is his first time playing with a quarterback that's not a Hall of Fame / top 5 quarterback talent. Because he's had Breeze, Brady.
Didn't he have Goff for a bit?
I mean,
He did in LA.
Yeah, you trying to say that Goff's a Hall of Famer, Vitali?
yeah, sure, I'm saying that. But I'm just saying, like, he's been on top offenses with top. Like the Houston, this is the worst quarterback and worst offensive system he's been in.
Sure.
It's hard to believe he's going to match what he did with these other great systems.
All right, Frankie, who's your trade for?
The Falcons were terrible this week.
I think they're going to continue being terrible, but go on.
I mean, just based on game script, Calvin Ridley shouldn't be terrible. We saw last year, he hit that stride. He was looking like he was ready to take over this team. And, I mean, Philly's secondary has always been laughable. I don't really understand how... Well, I mean, the Falcons' offensive line sucked, but I don't see how he can have any worse of a stat line than he did this week. And I think because of that, I mean, I'm willing to take the risk as far as, maybe it happens again. And, I mean, that's going to depress his price even more if it happens next week. But I think that just based on the amount of times that the Falcons are throwing the football and the fact that it's basically him, Russell Gage, and, I mean, they've already shown they...
Oh, Russell Gage droppable for me at this point. He got almost no work this past week.
Yeah, I think he got 2 targets and no catches.
Yeah, he didn't get any catches at all. It's just so perplexing to me because, I mean, Kyle Pitts didn't get that much work either. We talked about it yesterday a little bit.
He got 8 targets, 4 catches. It was just he was all short yardage. Like the Falcons just looked inept.
The guy, I mean, I was gonna make this point yesterday where we were talking. Actually, never mind. I'm not going to make this point now because it's a completely different point. And
Sure.
But Calvin Ridley, the talent is there. The upside is there. He had a bad game. He had a terrible stat line. You can buy him probably pretty cheap right now. Maybe to get him as cheap as you might want, he probably needs that next game to be also atrocious. But, I mean, you might be able to get him not 50 cents on the dollar, maybe 75 on the dollar. Maybe, again, you're trading away one of these guys for a wide receiver because they're shallow at running back. I mean, we have 3 We have a couple wide receivers here, a couple running backs that we're trading away, trading for. This is the guy that you're drafting in the 3rd round, who we saw have a top 5 season last year. Well, top 4, because I think he finished right ahead of or behind Diggs. So,
yeah, I mean, I'm not worried about Calvin Ridley at all.
I mean, I think that eventually we've seen how terrible this Falcons defense can be. So they're going to be throwing the ball. I think just based on upside alone and the talent that's there, there's no reason you shouldn't try and trade for Calvin Ridley now. Maybe wait a week and see if it goes down even more. But, I mean, again, this for me, I mean, I've loved Calvin Ridley even before he blew out last year. He was almost one of my stamps last year. But I went with Julio instead, unfortunately. But it's... No,
Yeah, I do agree with you there, Frankie, where it's like I think that the Falcons as a whole present a lot of opportunity for fantasy managers right now because they looked terrible. They looked like a team that got a brand new head coach in the offseason, and Arthur Smith I don't know what he's trying to implement in Atlanta because their game plan this past week looked like throw it short and get sacked a lot. Like it's a system that looked really bad week 1, and it's probably going to look worse before it looks better because their next 2 matchups are the Buccaneers and the Giants. So, like, Matt Ryan's going to spend a lot of time on his ass over the next couple weeks. I actually agree with one of your secondary points that I think I would wait on Calvin Ridley because if I have to bet, I'm betting his price goes down. I probably buy him after week 2 because I think he can have a resurgent game against the Giants, but I don't really see much upside for this hapless Falcons team against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers next week. Like they're just gonna run. Vea's going to be going directly through this line. This is going to be the textbook definition of a turnstile offensive line next week. Matt Ryan's not going to be throwing. He's just going to it's going to be hit while throwing. It's going to be sacked, thrown out of bounds, picked. Like it is going to be ugly next week.
It's going to be Pat Mahomes in the Super Bowl.
Yeah. Basically, when I was looking at this game, Philly, we knew that their secondary wasn't anything special, but we knew that their front 7, especially their D-line, was pretty good. And you get for the quarterback, and as Patriots fans, we've seen before, that's exactly how you shut down an offense. You don't need to have good corners if the quarterback's sitting on his ass. So, especially with him going against another defense that has amazing D-linemen, I don't want to trade for him just yet. Like I said, I want to wait for week 2 and then go to the Giants, who are a little more secondary focused, where I think Calvin Ridley can use his talent to overcome that secondary.
Sure.
Hopefully they just say, hey, we're going to play college-style shotgun every play and just throw it.
Yeah.
So, that's the only way I can see this offense getting going. But, yes, that game against Philly scared me enough where I was like, wait, is this just the end of the Falcons being able to throw the ball? Is this just when they crater?
I will say I do feel I think I'll take partial responsibility for Calvin Ridley's poor stat line because I tweeted out a joking Calvin Ridley is good tweet.
Yes, I saw that.
And then immediately after that, he stopped getting work. I was like, oh no, he was doing so because he was getting hit early and often in that game, and then the work just disappeared. All right, my trade for guy is one that we were hyping up a bunch over the offseason. Aaron Jones. To anyone who watched that Packers game, was probably slapping Aaron Jones on the side of milk cartons because, him and that entire Packers offense was kind of just they didn't show up to work on Sunday. They did not show up to play football against the Buccaneers, and it's easy to understand why when you have to go against a future Hall of Famer like Jameis Winston. I mean, 5 touchdowns, unbridled efficiency. You can't match that.
You mean the Saints, not the Bucs, right?
Yes, I do mean the Saints.
Yeah,
I was thinking Jameis Winston. He was on the Bucs for so many years, but
there are people saying that
caught up in the Aaron Rodgers getting benched for Jordan Love fiasco, or maybe being overshadowed by that is more what I mean. 5 attempts, 9 yards.
I thought Najee Harris
that might be Aaron Jones' worst football performance ever.
Fair.
I don't think there's ever a more buy low time for Aaron Jones than right this second, except for maybe 1 second ago when you should have already been trading for him. Because he is just a running back that for whatever reason people are just ready to give up on. No one ever wanted to give him credit, to put him where he was due. He finally almost moves into that range, being drafted as the running back 6, running back 7 really this year, which basically the highest he's been drafted ever. And now people finally believe in him. First performance out of the gates, stinker. Like almost 1 yard a carry. That is atrocious. Like, he is someone who I'm surprised I'm not seeing more vitriol for in fantasy football circles, because people seem ready to hate on everyone else who did bad this week. Zeke and Henry, who had just mediocre weeks, and like not atrocious like this. But this isn't the future for me. Like, this Packers team, just for whatever reason, they seem just out of sorts this week, and I can't believe the benching really helped at all. Once this team gets a get right game, which they're going to get this week when they play the Lions, who might be the second worst team in football, they're going to get a get right game this week. They're all going to go out there and score a ton of fantasy points, and everyone's going to forget about what happened in week 1 against the Saints. And you're going to miss your chance. Your chance to buy low on Aaron Jones is between now and when do they play? Monday? Now and Monday.
Yeah, it's no secret on the show how I feel about Aaron Jones. But I think that the reason that we're not seeing that kind of vitriol towards him that we're seeing towards Zeke and Henry is because the Titans didn't play well. The Cowboys offense played well. The Cowboys offense looked good. The Packers, I had people telling me that Aaron Rodgers just mailed in the game. And watching the game, I would almost believe that. Some of the throws that he was making were just, what are you doing?
Yeah, that second pick was very uncharacteristic for him.
I mean, we were watching the game. We were like, oh, was that a pass? No, that was a.
Yeah, you thought that was a kickoff.
Yeah, I thought that was a kickoff, but no, and that's why, because I can't put any of the game. Well, I won't say any of it. I can't put a substantial amount of the blame for that loss on Aaron Jones' performance, because Aaron Rodgers played so atrociously, and that Packers offense as a whole played so atrociously.
Sure.
And I mean, I'm in the same boat as you. If I can get Aaron Jones for anything, I mean, I might, throw a high-end wide receiver, maybe a middle. I mean,
you're still gonna have to pay, 70, 80 cents on the dollar to get him right now, because he's still a top end running back. People just paid a first round pick for him to get him in their fantasy drafts, or they spent a lot of auction bucks to get him. You're not going to get him for cheap, but you're going to get him for cheap compared to what you would normally have to pay for Aaron Jones.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Vitaly, who's your buy this week?
So, as I said, my trade for is Antonio Gibson. There's a lot of bad buzz around this team. They just lost Fitzpatrick. Curtis Samuel's injured. They're still a good team, but there's a lot of bad buzz. And he had a solid week, which he also just kind of devalued with a fumble.
Sure.
So his ending stat line doesn't look great. His ending points is 8.5 point PPR. But he got 20 carries in this one. I believe it's 90 yards and a few targets. He's that workload that he got right there, I think that is indicative of the team trying to use him more as their feature running back, moving J.D. McKissick to more of a Tevin Coleman, purely just the catching back. So when I look at him, there's bad press. He actually performed well, but that fumble's kind of shady and over. He's a guy that people were up and down on. So if you had a manager who ended up taking him because he fell to him and he was like, I need a running back in the second, it could be an easy guy to pull off of. And on top of that, you're not paying first-round price if you're targeting one of the guys who had a bad week, like a Zeke, a Henry, an Aaron Jones. And I think this guy has the potential now that the passing game just took a big hit, that they're going to have to rely on their running game to really establish a passing game with, play action and all that stuff. And like I said, there's a reason why Antonio Gibson was sliding up in the second round so much, whereas all the other running backs were more in that top third area. It's because of his breakaway potential. It's because of his elusiveness. I think like right now is the time if you were somebody who just wasn't positioned correctly to get him, or if you had somebody who was super high on him and took him a little early, to try and just talk to the man and say, hey, how you feeling? Like, what are you looking at for this? He didn't really perform. He got the carries, but he couldn't really get much done. This offense looks like it might be slowing down. It might be going back to what we saw last year with J. McKissick. Like, you can really talk up the fear from last year about Antonio Gibson to really kind of worm your way into a deal that's a lot more friendly for you.
Sure. I think the only reason I would think that this one could be hard to do is just because he's a fantasy darling of so many people, and the hype is still really big on him. But yeah, I mean, if you got a panicking manager, I love the target. All right, I think that'll do it for our trade fours and trade aways. We've got some starts and money picks for you guys now, so we're gonna be going around the table talking about, and obviously this is early in the week, so if anything changes we tried to pick safe ones that are still going to be good at the end of the week as they are at the beginning of the week. But if anything changes with these over the course of the week, any surprise injuries or anything like that, we'll be sure to update you on a later show, likely the countdown show, part 1 or part 2. I'll lead off with this one. For my starts of the week, I've got Mr. Chris Carson against Tennessee, who they played okay against the run last week, but it's Chase Edmonds and James Conner, and I'm not really as worried about that rushing offense. Kyler Murray was kind of just throwing the ball with impunity. They didn't need to run as much. Chris Carson just had a really good rushing day against Indianapolis, which is a very stout rushing defense, and he had a fumble late in the game that kind of marred his fantasy outlook. But overall, it was a solid day from him. I expect him to just kind of do whatever he wants with this Tennessee defense. Seattle seemed to want to use Chris Carson. He should be a lock into your lineups this week if you're kind of wavering because he gave you a mediocre fantasy output in the first week. And then Debo Samuel against Philadelphia. They're traveling to Philly for this one. So it is cross coast. That's really my only worry there. I do hate when West Coast teams have to go east or East Coast teams have to go west. But aside from that, Debo just had a massive game this past week against the Lions. Philadelphia is not the stout defense that they just made the Falcons just made them look like. They are susceptible to the pass. The Falcons just suck. Lock Debo in. Start him with confidence until he gets hurt, because we know that injury is coming, unfortunately, because it's Debo Samuel. But until it does, enjoy the fantasy points.
Yeah, I like both of those picks.
Vitaly, what about your two?
Sure, let me go ahead and take it away. So, you joked about easier, more safer picks.
Yep.
I'm going a little ballsy with this one.
Yeah, I hadn't actually seen yours, but until I started scrolling down the document after I said that, I was like, oh, yeah, those aren't actually safe at all.
One of them's fine. I'll talk about him first. Mr. Noah, fantastic. Jerry Jeudy, he's gone. He's gone for some time. Cortland Sutton is still working his way back on this offense, and basically they made it clear that they were treating him with kid gloves. They know Cortland Sutton can do it. He showed a little bit of the yips in the preseason, and they want to slowly work him back into a load so he can feel confident on his legs. Noah already had a solid, target share in this game, and he's getting to play against Jacksonville, who just let the Houston Texans light them up. So I expect a increase in his workload, and on top of that, a much easier to deal with Jags team. So for anyone out there who's looking for a tight end, maybe, if you were waffling on Noah Fantastic, or if he got dropped for whatever reason, I saw it in a couple of leagues just because of the amount of mouths to fill in this offense. It just got a lot more condensed, and I feel like Noah's going to be able to take advantage of this injury week for both their main receivers. My other one, my risky one, Mr. Cole Beasley. So I do recognize that he is not a fan of the vaccine, so that is a threat for him playing basically any day, any week.
Yeah, I imagine he's out there like licking lampposts and just.
He's been good so far, but he either's gotten the vaccine and hasn't talked about it because he wants to play and he doesn't want to get fined, or he's just gonna see what happens. But you know what? He is still good to go for right now, and Josh Allen and that team are looking to have a bounce-back game. Miami, I see them as basically a lesser version, like defensively, as Pittsburgh.
Sure.
Still very strong, but they still slang the ball against them. And Cole Beasley got, what I want to say, 12, 14 targets in that game. So if you're getting a receiver who went as late as Beasley, especially with all the news around him, you could probably even pick him up. Or if you stashed him, kudos to you. You can use him against Miami in a flex spot. I think he's going to be a great guy, especially for PPR and half-point PPR leagues.
Frankie, what about your two?
Well, we kind of touched about this a little bit earlier in the show. Jameis Winston is one of my starts for this week going against Carolina, who, I mean, they just had their easy game. They had their warm-up game versus the Jets, but now they get to play a real quarterback, the QB1, mind you. Fun little stat I saw was that he was I believe the first quarterback to throw for under 150 yards and 5 touchdowns and 0 picks. And, I mean, that Packers secondary, I mean, last year we talked about it. Their run defense wasn't great. Their secondary was actually pretty good, and he was making them look like school children out there. Kind of the same thing, or I guess opposite for Carolina, where their pass defense is fine. Their run defense is where they've made their hay over the past couple of years, like Luke Kuechly back when he was there. But no, I think Jameis is a really talented quarterback, and I don't see why lighting up such a good team like the Packers, he can't just do that same thing to the Panthers.
Yes, I do also remind someone at this table does have a bold prediction about his fantasy finish, and he is the QB3 right now, so just kind of putting that out there.
And my other start of the week is, I'm very happy to say this, Mike Williams versus Dallas. Our secondary is still terrible. Shocker to no one. We didn't do anything to really improve it over the offseason. And Mike Williams, look at it. I mean, honestly, this for whatever troubles they had, there were a couple of drops that were costing Herbert, touchdowns and yardage. But overall, I was happy with what I saw with the offense this week. And I mean, Mike Williams has been that deep ball guy before, and I mean, we saw Brady do it against Dallas on Thursday, where we being Dallas, for anybody who's not familiar, I'm a Dallas fan, are very susceptible to the deep ball and the pass in general. I'm happy that Mike Williams finally has a legitimate quarterback throwing him the ball, and he was going up and making insane catches this week, and I am locking him in there as one of my starts of the week.
And your other start?
That was Jameis Winston. That was the first guy I said.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. And then, sorry, my brain just heard you talking about Jameis Winston, and it got so happy. All right, Frankie, why don't you take us with your money picks as well while you are?
I guess we're doing the U-turn here.
Yeah, we're gonna circle back around and give you some spotlight time here.
I am in the opposite camp from you guys, where while the Damien Harris fumble was costly, I think that even if for some reason he sits out a quarter, we talked about this a little before the show, I think that we're gonna see a not fully new Bill Belichick, but I mentioned this before. There's not really a solidified guy behind him. There's not really a 1A, 1B. It's pretty much just him, Stevenson, and then you said Taylor was
J.J. Taylor.
Yeah, he was the guy who you guys were worried about taking away carries. I'm not worried about that. I mean, he might see a little bit of work because we might get that Bill. Oh, he sits a quarter because he fumbled last game.
Right.
He's definitely the most talented back on this team. He showed it in this last game against Miami, who, I mean, is in my opinion, better defense than the Jets. And, I mean, at 5,400, I mean, that's, based on game script, I think he's going to see a lot of running work. This Patriots defense didn't look terrible against what I think is a much better Miami team again than the.
I mean, I think the defense looked great.
Basically, they're getting the Jets bump where your team is just going to look better overall, and I think that Harris is going to be able to feast from that. And my next lock in here is Dante Johnson at 6,400. He did have that injury that kind of bumped him out for a little bit. He came back and still was the target monster and was very efficient as he always has been. I mean, he's definitely the one on that team. He is Ben's favorite target overall, and I think that he's just going to continue what he did last game. Again, against a much worse team than he played last week.
I'm a little worried about Deontay just because the price is high for what he did. And that Steelers offense just looked kind of last week. The price is a little high for what Deontay has delivered in week 1, and to really return value on that, he has to get close to 20 fantasy points, which is tough. But in full PPR, definitely more doable than half or standard. But Tally, who are you two money picks?
So I got guys at a similar value. So my first one is David Montgomery at 6,100. He's playing against the Cincinnati Bengals. I just like he's got pretty much locked in workload. He went up against the tough defenses week 1. And I think that's helping his price for this week. Cincinnati, I have no fears against that defense.
Sure.
And I think this is going to be the first time I actually kind of see this Chicago offense able to kind of produce and see what it has. Hopefully it's Justin Fields out there, because I feel like he's just...
I mean, there were already calls for him this week when he got some run against the Rams.
Yeah, like Dalton against the Rams, it was the sacrificial lamb game, but Fields is your future. Just get him out there, especially against Cincinnati. This is the time to do it, and I think if we can supplement this offense with a running quarterback and the just upside of their offense through the air with Fields, I think David Montgomery should have room to run all over the place. My second money pick, George Kittle against Philly for 6,400. So I do like the Debo Samuel pick. I think he's still going to perform for fantasy managers. George Kittle is one of the best tight ends in the league, and there's a reason why he was going in the top 3. People were a little down on him because of the injury last year, but that was kind of a freak injury, just like if you're a basketball fan, Gordon Hayward, where he just spun his ankle to the side. It's a tough injury to come back from, but he looked fine this past week. It just all the workload went through Debo, and there wasn't much. He still had a fine fantasy stat line. I said once in, I think that's something that's slightly suppressing his price. I look for him to just take apart this Philly defense that's not able to contain him. Like I have no qualms about him rolling him out there, and I think his price point is reasonable.
Sure. And then my two are Nicholas Chubb against the Houston Texans and Cooper Kupp against sorry, I just clicked away from my notes and I immediately forgot what I was looking at. And Cooper Kupp against Indianapolis. Nick Chubb is the most just looking at the running back pricing for next week. Everyone got a little bit of a bump. Christian McCaffrey's back just below 10K. Nick Chubb's still sitting sub 8K, and I love that going up against what should be the worst run defense in football this season at home. Chubb is going to be used early and often. I would be shocked if he doesn't get 18 plus carries this week, and if he hits 20, I'm not going to be surprised at all. He could easily rack up another 2 touchdowns in this game because the Texans just aren't very good. He's going to be used to control the tempo of this game and just lead the Browns to an easy win after losing a tight one against the Chiefs. And for 7,800, he should be a borderline lock to cash in on at least 3x this week because of his usage that he should see against this team. And then Cooper Kupp, it's egregious that his price barely changed because Cooper Kupp is 6K this week. 6K. And he just dropped an absolute monster of a game this past week. I mean, I don't really see the logic here, but if DraftKings wants to give me free money, I'm going to take free money. He was clearly Stafford's favorite target. He and Stafford hooked up for over 100 yards. Cooper Kupp found his way into the end zone. Like this is a match made in heaven. It makes it very easy to stack him with Stafford because stacking and correlation is important in DFS. And he should. I think the only downside to him being at this price is he should be chalk. But him actually a guy sitting right next to him I almost did, which is Antonio Brown. But 2 6K receivers who are both going to be very chalky. Both great cash game plays, and you might have to find some ways to work some contrarian plays into your lineup if you're going with him in tournaments. But I think he's too good to pass up, honestly.
Yeah.
All right, and then finally for this show, we've got some waiver news to bring for you guys. So week 1 waivers are obviously important. I think the biggest waiver ad of the week, for me at least, is probably Elijah Mitchell at running back. He carried the load once Raheem Mostert went down. I think Trey Sermon's still the long-term guy, but at least short-term, it's got to be Elijah. I mean, Trey Sermon was a healthy scratch this week.
Yeah, he did break
the
rookie rushing record, by the way.
Yes.
Game 1.
Yeah, so I'm not worried about Trey Sermon swooping in week 2 and being an issue. I would still, if he gets dropped, I'd pick him up because, like I said, I do believe he's going to end up with the job. But as of right now, go out, add Elijah Mitchell. He should be the panic ad to plug in there just to seal the Raheem Mostert hole in people's lineups for now. Other ones that are interesting ads that are probably out there as well. Kenneth Gainwell, 8% rostered, had 11 carries behind Miles Sanders, played really well, probably is in line. It's looking like that's going to end up as more of a timeshare than I think people thought, which is why I always hated the Miles Sanders being drafted so highly as it was, but that's another conversation for another time. But 8% rostered, he's out there. Obviously, he's not being pumped because of an injury, so he could fly under the radar a bit for people. You probably have to spend less on him than you will on Elijah Mitchell, who's probably more like 15-20% of your fab. And then if you're really desperate, Mark Ingram actually looked okay. It was against the Jaguars, and he's only 19% rostered, but like if you need running backs, Mark Ingram is out there probably.
Yep.
And he's gonna get work, I guess.
Yeah, if he's gonna get used that much, there's no reason he can't be a flex guy for you.
Yeah, and then for wide receivers, Sterling Shepard is probably going to be the top ad for wide receivers for the week. He's only 39% rostered, and he popped off against the Broncos. 113 yards on 7 receptions, 37-yard touchdown. He's going to disappoint you as soon as you add him onto your team, but you kind of got to take that risk if you need a wide receiver because he looked like they're far and away their lead target.
Some of us may have drafted Jerry Jeudy and also drafted Sterling Shepard.
Yeah, so you're
Hindsight
just
2020.
So you're rolling the dice left and right over here, Frankie.
Yep.
Nelson Aguilar had an okay game. The final box score wasn't crazy, but 72 yards and a touchdown is fine. He's 33% rostered right now in most leagues, so he's 66% of leagues he's out there. Good guy to go grab if you need a wide receiver and you don't trust Sterling Shepard. You want somebody with even worse hands. There you go. Terrace Marshall I always want to put an N in that name. Terrace Marshall Jr. Is another one who I am, and it ties into my Robbie Anderson argument. Terrace Marshall Jr. saw twice Robbie Anderson. He had 6 targets this week. He looks like he is going to be a factor in this offense. He looks like he's probably going to be stepping into the Robbie Anderson role. We all joked about it over the offseason because there was that picture of Robbie Anderson looking aghast at Terrace Marshall making these crazy catches in the end zone. It's
I was
like, oh no, he's here to take my job. And it's like, no, he actually is here to take Robbie Anderson's job.
Yeah, no, I thought he was going to take his job.
So he's one who I would take a shot at because he could end up developing into an impactful flex or maybe wide receiver 3 role for that team this season. And then Christian Kirk, if you really want to get risky, had a quietly nice game this week against the Titans. It's a crowded offense. There's a lot of mouths to feed, but we've been waiting for Christian Kirk to emerge as the number 2 for a while. He's obviously never going to be the alpha dog while DeAndre Hopkins is there, but he could easily turn it, especially if the Cardinals are going to play as fast as they did. He could emerge into a big time role for them. And then for tight ends, there wasn't really any tight ends that I particularly wanted to mention. Jawan Johnson was fine, but I think I still want to see what that Saints offense looks like when they aren't just blowing out the Packers.
Yeah, it doesn't help that they only threw the ball 20 times.
Yeah, he's fine for a speculative ad, but there aren't really any tight ends that I was itching to mention this week aside from him.
Yeah.
Defensive streamers, though, because we got some streamers at quarterback, some streamers at defense. I'll go around the table. Let us each do one. I'll lead in with the first one. Browns versus Houston, 58% rostered. No real explanation needed there. The Browns have a great defense. They made, Kansas City look bad for a couple quarters of football, and it's way easier to make the Texans look bad for all the quarters of football than it is to, make Patrick Mahomes look bad for all of them. So start them with confidence this week.
Next, we got the Packers versus the Lions. They're only 25% ownership, and they are a team that I could see being dropped a lot after this dud of a performance.
I mean, a lot of them might not have even. We weren't a super highly touted defense, so they're probably still out there currently.
But they get the Lions, and the Lions don't really have much other than Swift and Hawkinson, and I think that the Packers should have a get-right game against them. So
Sure.
if you're looking for a defense and you don't have one of those elite ones, or the Browns slip past you, go for them.
I think they're good too because the turnover potential for Goff is high. So even if it does become a shootout, it could become a shootout where Goff still throws 2 picks.
Yeah.
Frankie, want to take us with the third defense?
That would be the Giants this week because, to much of our dismay, Ryan Fitzpatrick went out.
Yep.
With his hip something.
Yep.
I'm not going to butcher it. And we got Heineke back in there.
Hip
Or
subflux
Heineke,
capacitor.
Is it Heineke?
Yeah, it's Taylor Heineke.
Sure. That offense gets a tremendous downgrade there.
Yeah.
And the Giants, for as much as their offense is terrible, their defense last year and, I mean, granted this year kind of even, has looked, pretty good.
Sure.
And I think they're going to be able to force some turnovers. They're going to be able to get to the quarterback more. That's, 7% owned? 19?
Yeah, 7% rostered. I could see him racking up a good amount of sacks this week, and Heineke's no stranger to picks.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
all I got for you.
This is definitely a contrarian one where people aren't going to be looking at this, and all of a sudden you pick up the Giants, and it's like, what? And if this offense struggles, you could really make out with a very sneaky pick.
Yeah, it's the old tried and true start good defenses against bad offenses strategy. All right, then we got a couple streaming plays for you here. Number one is one that Frankie mentioned. Jameis Winston, New Orleans Saints at Carolina Panthers, 34% rostered. He had incredible efficiency. They didn't throw very much week 1. And honestly, they might not throw very much this week. It's kind of weird recommending a quarterback who might not throw much as a streamer. But we know Jameis can throw if he needs to. And, with the touchdown upside that he showed there, I'm fine rolling the dice on that because really at the end of the day, the touchdowns are what matters. So if they're going to rely on him to huck the ball in the red zone and score through the air, even if they don't get to the red zone through the air, that's really all I care about. Yeah. Kirk Cousins, Minnesota Vikings at Arizona Cardinals, 35.2% rostered. This one's just plain and simple. It's going to be a shootout. The Vikings are going to have to throw to keep up with the Cardinals. The Cardinals are a very fast-paced offense. You start your Vikings this week. And that includes Kirk Cousins, who we've seen can be a very serviceable fantasy quarterback at times. And then finally, Ben Roethlisberger, Pittsburgh Steelers versus the Las Vegas Raiders, 22.2% rostered. That's going to go down because Big Ben was a streaming candidate this past week, and he let people down. So there are going to be people in your leagues who drop Ben Roethlisberger because boo-hoo, he's old, he's bad. The Raiders are a good source of get-right games because they're bad. They can't. They I don't know if you guys have been watching the game at all tonight. I watched some before we started filming, but they didn't look like they knew what to do to stop the Ravens at all in any facet of the game. Big Ben is going to be able to throw against them if he wants to. It's a good spot to target him and once again get a bit of a get-right game going for him.
Yeah.
Do you guys have any streaming quarterbacks you wanted to mention that I didn't bring up?
No, my big one was actually Kirk this week.
Yeah, no, those are the big ones for me.
Kirk's probably my top target if I had to choose, just because I like the combination of elite weapons and pace-up game. So
Sure.
All right, well, that'll do it for us here. Join us later this week as we bring you the Countdown Show. And as always, if you have any questions, issues, concerns, start, sit, dilemmas, things of that nature, hit us up on Twitter or leave comments down in the video. Be happy to get back to you and give you some help on that. Adios.